Good day, distinguished guests. I will skip my introduction and Jennifer's introduction as done by the moderator. So let's keep look at the agenda. As you can see briefly, looking at the agenda, what we want to share today with you is the NSEC-COE experience on energy management, starting from the very first step taken in such promising area of research for military. Then we will explain our ongoing project, including trying to summarize some results and anticipating related future activities. So let's start with the requirement. As agreed by ACT during the establishment phase of the center in 2012, the mission of the NATO NSEC-COE is to assist NATO, nation partners, and other bodies by supporting NATO capabilities development process, mission effectiveness, and interoperability, providing a comprehensive and timely expertise on all aspects of energy security. That include, of course, energy efficiency for military forces as well. There are many ways and many tools for reaching that goal, and a lot of them have been implemented by nation in an uncoordinated effort in the last decade. In terms of energy management, we recognize that it is an instrument that can be implemented and in an immediate short period could be very low economic impact. If you today are here, it is because you are strongly convinced as NATO we have to share our energy efficiency technology and best practices in order to establish common energy standards. Energy efficiency solutions, whether material like technologies or not material such as energy management techniques, need to be standardized in order to obtain and maintain interoperability. Looking at you, at national decision maker, we strongly recommend that energy efficiency should become a minimum capability requirement for national initiatives and innovative solutions, and at the same time should be included in the NATO defense planning process. The long-term goal of our energy management task request by NATO ACT is to contribute to the development of NATO standards agreement related to energy management in operational environment. Few backgrounds. So to start at the beginning of our project in 2014, we produced a report titled Energy Management in the Military Expeditionary Environment, which presented information from various national records and reports on best practices in energy management based on trials, experiment, and operational energy usage. Today, an update is ongoing. 1 year later, following the tendency of some nations to address the energy management for military purposes by applying civilian standards, the Center, in cooperation with Schneider Electric Company, produced an ISO 51 application plan and a related handbook for possible use in a deployed force infrastructure in an operational military environment. Today, the main determination was to test the applicability of the ISO approach in the military environment, with particular focus on testing its utility for the military deployed operational environment. For that reason, in 2017, after reaching an agreement with the French MOD, the operational camp in Niamey, in Niger, is being used as a case study location. I want to stress that it is an operational camp, which inherently means it is a challenging environment, not only because of the climate, of course, but also because the operational tempo, the high variation in camp occupancy rates, and overall, the fundamental attitude that other military activities take precedence over energy management, energy efficiency. The project design. These three pillars represent the principle of energy management as already thought and revised by the NATO NSEC. The next slide covers the disciplines that are needed to apply such principles. As already said, at the first stage of the energy management research, NSEC identified ISO 50001 as the most relevant solution for enhancing energy management in the deployed operational military domain. However, after further consideration, the civilian version of the standard was assessed to be too generic for use in a military expeditionary context. Therefore, in attempt to have something more suitable for use in the military domain, NSEC procured a draft military adaptation of the standard, including a handbook and application plan. We are currently testing the application plan, but we recognized early on in the process that it was too resource-intensive for a deployed operational military unit to execute. We also recognize that in addition to the traditional pillar of energy management, which is essentially command and control, further aspects needed to be taken into consideration. Specifically, they are technological application and tools, as well as encouraging behavioral change. However, a thread that runs through all versions of ISO approaches is the OODA loop, plan, do, check, act, which the military are already familiar with because it is the very basis of military planning process in NATO. Let me introduce now some specific characteristics of the project. It is an enhanced, as I already said, ISO 50001 approach, because it involves not only using ISO principle, but also technological application like electricity metering and behavioral changes like COM-B method. We will explain what COM-B is in a couple of slides. We are using a case study methodology to identify changes in how energy is managed before and after implementing new guidance based on enhanced ISO 50001 approach. We are working in a multi-organizational and multidisciplinary team. We have military and civilian expertise, engineering, management consultancy, and behavioral science expertise. NATO NSEC is in charge of the project management. As you can see on the slide, the nations involved in the project are providing various forms of expertise. Few words about the type of data we are collecting. Open answer from questionnaires to assess level of awareness and engagement in energy management and energy efficiency. Direct observation on the site. Context information like weather, like camp occupancy rate, and meter reading. We have at the moment in place more than 30 sensors. Looking at the project time scale, I want to highlight some the most important past events that we consider decisive for the entire project. The first recce, number one, was important in order to gather context data, to understand the big picture, and to develop a relationship with the key decision maker in the command and control chain in the camp. During the Paris workshop, number 4, we designed a tailored recommendation for changes based on the data collected during the baseline visit to the camp. Jennifer will discuss the finding of the baseline visit. During the workshop, we ordered the list of proposed recommendations based on a cost-benefit analysis. Now we are in the implementation phase, which is the most challenging phase of the project, in which it is up to the commander and his energy team to ensure that our recommendations are endorsed and actioned. During the analysis phase, we will compare the achieved results in terms of energy consumption reduction with recommendations that were implemented. And now, because we will go a little bit inside the project, as project leader, Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrea, and good morning, everybody. So I will talk a little bit about the findings from the baseline that we took earlier this year. So the behavior change methodology that we are using, at the very heart of it is this process that we call COM-B. And effectively, this process suggests that for anybody to exhibit a behavior, they need the capability, the opportunity, and the motivation to do that behavior. So the capability means that people need the skills, the knowledge, the awareness, the training to do the behavior that you want them to do. The opportunity means that they need it to be within perhaps their job role. They need to have allocated time and resources to do that behavior, whether that be daily, weekly, monthly, and so forth. And in terms of the motivation, I'm sure you do not need to be a behavioral scientist to understand that this is often the most difficult element of behavior to change or to strengthen. But people need to understand that the behavior you want them to do is meaningful to them, and this means meaningful at various levels, especially within the military, from strategic to tactical. Now, the COM-B method, we actually found from our extensive literature review early last year, we took this from the health domain and thought actually we could apply it within the military domain. And so that's what we have tested over the last year, both at NSEC and within the UK MOD, and have found it to be extremely useful to use at both military deployed infrastructure locations and also fixed infrastructure locations within the UK. A little bit more detail on what we mean by that COM-B. So in terms of capability, people can have both the physical and the psychological capability to do things. So the physical is having those skills and having the training and stamina in place to do a behavior. The psychological being having the necessary psychological skills to engage in a behavior. In terms of the motivation, we break this down into two elements, both reflective and automatic motivation. The reflective looks at the self-conscious planning and evaluations, so the beliefs about what is good and bad and what I should or should not do. And the automatic are those automatic processes where we use our gut instincts to decide whether we should or should not do something. And then in terms of opportunity, the two elements are the physical and the social. So the physical could be, have you provided the right equipment at the right time, in the right place, for the people to be able to take the opportunity to turn off that equipment, to do something differently. And the social, this is often the most difficult element of the opportunity leg of behavior. So are the social cues there? Are people seeing that other troops are doing the same behavior? Are the leaders leading by example to provide an opportunity in terms of social cues? So as Andrea mentioned, we are using several different data collection methods within our project, one of which being a survey, so questionnaires. So earlier in the project, when we took our baseline findings, our baseline readings, we wanted to understand the level of awareness across the troops at our case study location, their level of awareness of energy initiatives at their camp. And as you can see on this slide, if I start with the graph on the left, yes, on your left, and there is only a few people at this camp who have self-reported that they feel they are in an energy role. Now, this is not surprising. It's often a very small amount of people who are specifically responsible for energy, but then it is the masses who are the energy users, and it's those people that we need to tackle in terms of changing the behavior. Now, both whether in an energy role or a non-energy role, the red bars show you how many people felt that they were not aware of any initiatives at the camp. And so the takeaway from this graph on the left is that actually we need to tackle both people in an energy role, who still, some of those people were not aware of energy initiatives, as well as the large majority of people not in an energy role. And then the graph, the more colourful graph on the right-hand side, shows you which elements of that COM-B model people felt were strongest at the camp. So did people feel that they had the capability or the opportunity or the motivation to change the energy behaviours and the energy management practices at the camp? And what you can see from the purple bars is that regardless of rank or across the ranks, it was the motivation leg of behaviour that was felt to be the weakest. And that tells us that any campaign or interventions that we design for the camp need to focus on the motivation of the staff to do something differently, because they felt that the capability and the opportunity was there, but the motivation was the place where we could focus our efforts. We also collected within our questionnaires and or within our observations a lot of qualitative data. So we looked at reasons for why people were not switching things off, why they were switching equipment off, and also their own suggestions for what they think would help them to be more energy efficient and employ better energy management practices at the camp. Moving on to the observations. So another type of data we were collecting was behavioral observations. So the meter readings tell us one thing. It tells us how much energy is being consumed and perhaps exactly where at the camp that is being used, but it doesn't tell us why or the context. So we did some behavioral observations as well. We wanted to see what was being done, good practices, bad practices, room for improvement, and so forth. And for example, on this slide, some of the pictures from the camp, there are air-conditioned units where the doors or the tents are left open. The air conditioning units, a lot of them are in locations that are not easily accessible, which means that maintenance is less likely to be done and less likely to be cleaned on a regular basis. So simple things like perhaps moving the air conditioning units would encourage people to clean them more regularly, and it makes it easier to access them. And then the third type of data, our meter readings. And I must take this opportunity to thank our Canadian colleagues who are contributing extensively to our project, particularly in the area of the metering equipment and monitoring. Now, from this graph, we recorded the peak energy draw every day to establish our baseline. And these readings are from January to April this year. And so each point on the graph is the peak draw for that day. The important thing to take away from this graph is that the horizontal lines, the blue, the red, and the black, show you when the first, the second, and the third generators come on at the camp. Now, the aim of our experiment is to reduce the need for the third generator through the energy management practices and changes. And if we were able to do this, we could save in the region of 80,000 litres of fuel per year for this one camp. Now, I talked about the fact that the COM-B was at the heart of our behaviour change process, because COM-B itself it's not the whole answer, and change in behaviour is a lot more complicated than that. But effectively, what we're talking about with our behaviour change methodology, and I don't have time here today to sort of walk you through the entire process. We actually teach this on a 2 to 3 day training course normally. But effectively, what we're talking about for any engineers in the room is systems analysis. So behavioural diagnosis, synonymous with systems analysis. We're trying to understand where there are opportunities to change behaviour or to build upon good practices. And I'll just talk a little bit about the interventions. So once we collected all of our baseline data, we used it to identify where we thought we could make some changes. And in fact, in terms of the proposed interventions, all of which align with ISO 50001, there were 37 that we identified, 17 being in the essential category. The ones that I've highlighted here on the screen were based on the results from the observations, the metadata, and the questionnaires, which all triangulated, and we triangulated the data and came to the same conclusions, such as moving air conditioning units, shading air conditioning units, and introducing tent scheduling, which is threefold. It's about improving the occupancy rates of tents. So if you have tents that will sleep 20 to 30 people, but only a handful of people in each of those tents, it's about reducing the number in some of the tents and increasing in other tents. It is also about categorizing tents in terms of their state of repair and using the better state of repair tents first before the second and third categories. And it's also about turning off the air conditioning units if the tent will be unoccupied for 12 hours or more. This slide, as you will hopefully notice, is written in French, because just to add to the complexity of the project and the challenges, this is a French military camp, so everything we are doing has to be written in French and meaningful to the French military soldier. And I will turn back to Andrea now to talk about what we will do next within the project.
And now, the hardest part of the presentation, it's about results. As anticipated, the case study is still ongoing, so we have no final results or impressive number to show you today. However, so far we have identified some important points. The first one is understanding the context as an imperative, seeking first to understand, then to be understood. This is the reason why we don't believe in a general list of recommendations applicable to all types and size of organization, irrespective of geographical, cultural, or social condition. Go on the recce and take the baseline. We will fully agree with ISO standard when it says successful implementation depends on commitment from all levels and functions of the organization, and especially from the top management. For that reason, engaging key stakeholder and decision maker like commander or executive officer is vital. But not only. Communication is another key for raising awareness, and together with training, this should be implemented before deployment. After is too late. Time is a main variable because changes need time. In our specific case study, we planned a 3-month implementation phase, but due to some unforeseen hurdles, we decided to prolong it. In case of time constraint, a possible solution could be focused on fewer interventions, but be aware that in this can be a limit saving. Moreover, less time means higher percentage of procedural error incidents. Quite close. Before ending the presentation, I want to inform you about the future of the current project. In a short term, relying on more incisive cooperation with the French camp management, we have to finalize the data collection and analysis activities in order to produce a final report. At the same time, we have to conduct the handbook review and prepare its update. We expect the first review release of the handbook to be available for all nations by June 2019. Again, we want to practice what we preach. So, even if the handbook is designed to be used in operational deployed military infrastructure, we are currently trying to implement an energy management system based on our multidisciplinary approach at the NATO NSCOE offices. For the medium-term period, we are deploying a trading model that, as a prototype, is currently part of our energy efficiency in military operation course. We are also planning to conduct a similar case study in a Baltic state, maybe 2, in cooperation with other NATO nations in order to validate the current case study findings. In that new experiment, we are going to move from a leader role to an advisor role, leaving the commander the maximum acting autonomy. And for the long-term idea, we would like to see the handbook adapt as the basis of the NATO energy management doctrine. Related to this, we have started the development of a certification methodology in order to assess on a voluntary basis the level of energy management of deployed operational military camp. I conclude my presentation. As you can see, within and behind this project, there is a lot of teamwork involved and a lot of effort in terms of financial and manpower resources, especially if you consider the NSCOE numbers. I want to use this floor to thank all the experts who are on board, expressing my personal appreciation, and I hope to continue our thriving cooperation into the future. We could not undertake this project without input from the wider project team. Thank you all.